And good afternoon. It started a little bit late, but we're having like a different type format. We don't have it as we don't have as much informational stuff to directly tell you as we're going to go round table with information that we think might be helpful. And you can ask questions just about any time once we're done speaking as we go. To start with me, my name is Zach Glazar. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Frog God Games. I'm also the one of the principal owners. And so I went from publishing material that was literally, the first thing I did was 8 pages long as a preview to my first Kickstarter, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But what I do now is I oversee production for Frog God Games, which is over $1 million a year revenue company. And we do work with about 16 different channels of income streams. And what I find in the process of that is that many of the little tricks that I learned from the time that I just started to now have become useful at bigger companies just because they're kind of unique experiences, but also what I've learned in the last 3 years that I wish I'd known when I started this. And Gary Con's actually where I started doing everything. I came in 2012 for the first time, hadn't played a game in 25 years. And I thought, I want to do this. And I didn't have any idea how hard it was, how much work it would take, and how ridiculous I looked to everybody else. But because of being here and meeting people and meeting everybody else, from everybody from like the people who had done it originally, to people who are doing it currently and at certain levels, and to everybody else who was wanting to, I think that we're all who are here are ultimate creators at heart. We love science fiction, we love fantasy, we love imaginary worlds, the kind of camaraderie you get in games that are shared stories and experiences. So I brought with me, I invited various different people that are extremely talented at different stages of this whole process. To my left here is Rocky Gardner. Rocky is one of the 2 owners of Silver Belay, correct?
Yep.
All right. And you guys, go ahead, take it on. Tell us about you and that.
We started Silver Belay 2.5 years ago or so. We started, I eventually want to publish a Mega Dungeon, so in order to get to that point, you have to learn all the tricks. We started with a couple of 1-page adventures, moved up. Last year at Gary Con, I think it was, when we published our first printed module. We've printed 2 now. We're working on 2 more at the moment, and it's just a lot of work. You know, you got to put in the effort and the time to get through with the publishing process and make it look. And every step, you got to get better and better. Every time you publish something, you learn a tweak, you learn a change, you learn how to do something just a little bit different, and all of those things add up over time to make a better and better product.
And also, Alyssa Faden is here, and she's near and dear to my heart because my very first published product from the Kickstarter was Whisper and Venom, and the best part of it still to me is the map that was for it. And she turned a horrible back of the napkin and then first time use of campaign cartographer example into one of the most beautiful maps I've ever seen. And Alyssa's also done some publishing. You did some game publishing. You've done all kinds of things within the digital realm. And she's here from an artist's perspective, something that I can't give. I can pretend a little bit, but she's here to give that. So give us a little about yourself.
And I've had some train wrecks too, yeah. I mean, so I'm Alyssa Faden, and I am right now, you know, a cartographer. I draw pretty much any type of map. I'm best known for my city maps for small-time publishers. But pretty much Frog God own me right now. And I love drawing for them.
That's on purpose.
Currently drawing Teagle for them. The map is going to be printed 16 feet wide. But, I mean, I've been actually in the business now for, I want to say, about 10, 12 years. I've run a Kickstarter for a couple of board games, and we might talk about that today because there was some trial and tribulations that I had on that one. So, and I think my pitfalls can be beneficial to you, so you maybe don't fall into the same ones. And also published some Pathfinder modules in the past too. We actually released several. And there were things that were good about those, but there were things that were wrong about those too. So I'm hoping today I can also tell you about my experiences there.
Ian?
So I'm Ian, I'm Rocky's partner. I mean, we started this because he wanted to publish his Mega Dungeon, and I'm the idiot who was like, all right, that sounds like we could do that. And he's right. So like he said, we've put out 2 print modules and a bunch of PDFs too. And that's a huge jump to go from PDF to print with a lot of different stuff that you have to think about and figure out if you want to break even. I mean, and I think that's like our goal is mainly to break even and not lose money.
And I think break even in terms of like, if I want to run the world's greatest, the coolest game at my home or on a VTT or anywhere else, and I want to use it to make it not just flashy, but efficient and fun and quick. There are things that you can do to make it better, and I think that I can do that is the biggest impetus. And I think that you're exactly right.
And I mean, it is like something that if you want to, so now is the age to publish something, because it's much more attainable than it ever has been. But I mean, I've been gaming for years. Rocky and I started this, and we met at a Gen Con and just kind of had a friendship from there that, like, and we're in different states. We still managed to work together.
2,000 miles away. Modern communication and modern publishing technology make it so that literally anybody can do it if they're willing to put in the work.
As long as you can resolve conflicted copies.
So what we're going to do, that's something to talk about. What we're going to do here is we're going to go one at a time and pick one of the things that I think is useful to know. Because honestly, I can think of 7 things in my mind, without even counting, honestly, there'd be more than that. That if I had known, besides I would have quit and not done it, that if I had known would have made everything a whole lot easier and a whole lot more fun for me, a whole lot more fun for like the players who wind up playing the games. So the first one I'm going to say is know your scope. I'm the worst offender for this, because if you ever wanted to say what not to do, is me, because I got pretty lucky. I got lucky for a lot of reasons. But
box set.
I blame Jeff Lane. No, honestly, when I grew up, I lived in a small town, and I loved like the box sets, the modules of AD&D. I don't think there's anybody here who had not been familiar with that. And I was upset always because I'd buy, we'll go off the last one with Greyhawk. I'd buy Salt Marsh, and I could not find a Sea Devil miniature to save my life because I lived in a town that always had the same 4 Hobbit packs, right? And so, or the same 1 castle pack. There's the really terrible terrain. And so I always thought that it just was unfair. I'd go down to the big city and they'd have all these things and I had no access and I couldn't afford them anyway. I always thought they should come in 1 pack. You should get 1, box that had the miniatures that were in the game. They had the dice, they had the maps, the poster maps, the regular maps, small map. And so because of Kickstarter, I got carried away. I was gonna do a 16-page module and to have 1 miniature. I thought this would be awesome. I've achieved the life goal, I can move on. And I watched Steve Jackson's Ogre Kickstarter going, I can do something like that. I'm smart. I did a game called Whisper and Venom, and it was an OSR game. I did a Pathfinder version, and it was actually on time. It was made $22,000, and it was about $22,000 to create, and the money that I invested in actually marketing it was beyond that. But it was special to me, worked on it real hard, got nominated for 2 Ennies. At the time I thought, I have a good chance at this. This is great. Not knowing that the other 3 companies were Paizo, WizKids, and it wasn't, at the time it wasn't Wizard Coast, FASA. Right, so I saw that and I'm like, sure. I was honored to be nominated for them, I honestly was, and looking back I'm surprised I even got that much. But it was awesome. And it didn't affect sales really more than $5. So it was a hard road to see all this great stuff you'd made. People really liked it, they got it, and then had to go try to sell it, right? And so that kind of large scope was useful for me for one reason, is that accidentally, both absolutely and accidentally, got me hired by Frog God Games. Bill Webb, who's the CEO, and ran Necromancer Games back to the 2000s, decided that he needed to expand and told like nobody. And then I was at Gamehole Con, I was minding my own business, sitting in the lobby area, and he and the guy I came with were drinking. And I don't drink, but I was up there at midnight, and I was running my own booth, and there's one guy doing all this. It was really hard. I'm carrying this cross country on airplanes and driving with stuff and packing up the booth and doing all that stuff. But I was tired. But I thought, this night I'm actually going to go out, and it turned out to be a good idea, because we're sitting there talking. He turned to me and looked at me and said, "I'm going to buy your company." And I laughed a little loud. I'm like, "It's not worth anything." And it turned out that I was able to. They didn't so much buy their company as they bought me for a couple of shares of ownership, and without having any idea what I do. And I wound up doing what I'll explain later, but I do supply chain stuff, all kinds of different things with games, except for write them, though I can and have. So scope's so important, because I understand why If you start with something and you don't have a definite goal in mind, the ability to, because of all the tools that are available to you, all the cool other products you see, that you get a great idea, like, oh, that's awesome, I'm gonna do that too. You really wanna say, no, for the very first time, I'm going to do X. Whether that be, I'm gonna make the best fantasy grounds game I can play, and I wanna make sure I have some either original art or art that reflects the game to make it immersive to players all around the world. Just do that first. And if you want to make PDF handouts, you can learn how to do that from Microsoft Word. There's stages to things. Don't be like me and finish your Kickstarter and be confident you can learn InDesign in 3 weeks. And I'll be honest with you, you can learn InDesign in 3 weeks. I don't recommend it. Well, a month, yeah. But I don't recommend it. My only experience with high school newspaper with PageMaker 1.0. The relevance of it was surprising. The only good news was the relevance was still there, where you don't leave, hanging copy, and you can wrap text, sort of. No, but I was every step of the way. If I had said I want to make a module, I could have made one. And it could have been easier to ship, easier to fill, and my life wouldn't have been so consumed. And because I was lucky with the time I've watched people actually do a Kickstarter or a company. And it has ruined lives, it has ruined marriages, it has destroyed families in horrible ways, because when you get $20,000 and the game's gonna cost you $40,000, you are not making a game, you're going to debtor's prison. I mean, not figuratively. And so scope is so important. And your free time, especially, I don't have any kids. And my wife's a flight attendant, God bless her. So I have days and days when nobody ever wants to talk to me. So I can just go into mode where I just constantly do this, and most people, they can't. And so I encourage everybody to, when you have a product in mind, make the greatest product you can, but know when to say no. Alyssa?
I think that was really good, thank you, because I didn't know my own scope when I did my Kickstarter. I got too carried away. But so I'm going to sound really negative now, and I don't mean to do this, okay? This is like a friendly warning of something I did not do. And I really hope if just one person walks out here today and learns from this, you might save yourself a whole lot of heartache. Trust no one. I've seen best friends say, oh, let me write for your scenario, let me write for your scenario. And when the crunch time comes for writing, they don't deliver. And I guarantee 9 out of 10, and that sounds appalling, but 9 out of 10 people want it more than they want to do it. I don't know whether it's procrastination that kicks in or what, but it's guaranteed it happens. And I'm talking about across the floor here, okay? All skill sets, all deliverable points of your project. I've seen writers not turn in work. I've seen artists not turn in work. And it doesn't matter if you've got a contract with them or not, or whether you trust them or you're friends with them, or even if they've delivered in the past or not. I have seen them time and time again not deliver on schedule, or even what was agreed upon. Don't trust in contracts. Do contracts, and contracts are important. But I'll tell you what, my best work and my best partnerships have actually been outside of contracts, because trust just transcends a contract.
I didn't know how to write one.
I lost my most money while under contract with a company. And it was like to the tune of $30,000, which, okay, in the publishing world, not a huge amount. But for me, it was my personal savings, okay? It was $30,000. I'm under contract with a company, and they just didn't deliver. They just didn't deliver. Now it's on me to legally pursue them. So I put another $10,000 of my own money for that. I'm now $40,000 in the hole. They filed bankruptcy. Well, I'm $40,000 in the hole. The contract meant nothing. And that's on me, because I lent on that contract, and I'm too easy to trust. Every single person you involve in your project, from the printer, from a factory, to a fellow writer, to artists, to a cartographer, assume that there is the chance, unless you've worked with them and you really have got a good rapport, assume that there is a chance that they won't deliver. Build in extra time for yourselves. Build in a backup plan. Check in with them regularly. Just so you, and don't throw down money up front. I mean, that's what I did. So that would be my top recommendation. Trust no one. Assume that every single person that you bring into your project is a potential point of failure until you've actually managed to work past that. And you will build your little network of trusted people. I guarantee that you will, but try to avoid the ones that are going to let you down, because they will. There will be that crew.
I want to add right there that trust goes to, we've been working together 5 years, and she didn't trust me to get pencils. I was getting from her seminar, and so I know where you're at, but honestly, that's one of the reasons why people have a hard time breaking into doing this. Because like, as for Frog God, we always need people. We always need writers. We need artists. We need everything. First time people, when you have a schedule and when you have, with so much budget, relying on the very first time people do things is very, very hard, and it's often extremely frustrating to the point where you almost don't do it, or you make very specific projects to do so. Right now we're buying so much content that we're doing so a little bit, but it's on me, because if I pick somebody to do a project we rely on, I'm the one in the end who's going to be responsible for that. I won't write it, but it'll be long remembered. So
I think that's important too, with so looking at art and contracts. So art, at least for Rocky and I, art is the biggest challenge to publishing something, because a wall of text is quite easy to produce, but producing something that's also visually appealing can be challenging. So art is expensive, quite expensive, probably more so than you think when you're going into it. So if you want a decent color cover, you're looking at $300 to $500.
And it's more so for first-time publishers than it would be for
because you know less people and you have less options, and people, and like she said, with trusting people, like Alyssa could promise me a map tomorrow, but I might not get that for 18 months because I'm not her biggest customer. I'm not going to do that. So I think you need to consider that and find the art, and like she said, don't pay ahead of time, especially when it's coming out of your pocket and it's not like your business profits if you're just kicking in. Because our first module, like we floated the cost, dumping out printing costs, so between art and stuff, and we're cautious. We started with $1,000 and made sure that we were very diligent about what we were doing, shopped around for everything. But if you're small publishing, use a local printer. If you're doing 100 copies or 200 copies, don't do anything ridiculous with China. Go to your local mom and pop shop, show them whatever, like you said, show them your salt marsh module and say, I want something that looks like this, and they'll work with you.
What I did.
And talk to you. And like you said, they said, this is what we want. We want an unfoldable cover, and that for that print one that we're talking about, I was ready to fist fight that she dumped a bunch of maps, and I was just faster than them in grabbing one.
True.
And then when they said, well, we took all of them, and I was, I threatened them. But
we're afraid.
But I know them, so it was amicable. But that's what you got to do, is be get out there and talk to people and figure some things out. I think Zach says that some of his box set stuff was a mistake, but and I don't think he's accurately describing that it was from a Venom box set, but it was literally almost if you open it, you cannot close it again, because it just bursts with miniatures. But the thing that he did master there that he can apply other places is learning to do as many of those things independently as possible. Because like you said, especially you're a small guy, you're set yourself a budget if you're going to do this, and don't go over it. If you want to publish a module, you could do it for $500.
You can do it for $5,000 too, and fundamentally, it's going to be not the diminishing returns is what happens, especially on first-time publishing, because you can expect 50 to 100 sales outside of a Kickstarter crowdfunding. So be aware, the investment you make it does make a difference. I invested a huge amount because this is my first one, and I thought this is going to be such a big deal. Look at all this stuff; it's so amazing. I just love it. If I'd made a 16 or 32 page module that was basically the same adventure with everything else with the color map, the experience for players would have been fundamentally the same. So if I'm doing this, say, as a store for organized play, be very aware of that. Just because you can make it great because you love it, make sure your spouse loves it too, and your family and your other jobs, because it matters.
I want to talk about coming to conventions and meeting people. Like they said, as a first-time publisher, we didn't have many contacts, but we learned and met a lot of people at GaryCon, TotalCon, all the conventions. I go to about 4 a year. I go to North Texas here, Gamehole, and TotalCon now, and meet and introduce yourself to people. Jeffrey Talanian, he's a great guy that will talk to you about, you know, this is Astonishing Swords. This is where I went to do this. This is, you know, he'll explain some of the stuff.
And he's like a success in the gaming industry who runs it out of his garage, and like he's doing it.
The Frog God guys, they're always willing to talk shop industry stuff, right? Joe Block. There are so many small publishers at these conventions where you can get tips and tricks from, just sitting there and talking to them and listening to what they say, asking questions. Talk to them all.
And who are willing to talk to you about some pricing stuff. Because like even looking at purchasing art, like how many of you know how much it costs to get art and whether you're getting cheated? And that's important, because like you said, you can blow your whole budget on art, and
art will make or break a budget for sure.
So, which is, I mean, as in tips, like there's lots of stock art out there.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to touch on next, was how to get around that.
No, go.
That's a perfect segue, honestly. My next tip would be the single most valuable thing that I did in terms of production was I got a subscription to the Adobe Creative Cloud. It was expensive per month, and I straight up admit it, but spending the time to learn how to do that myself enabled me to take art that was given that needed slight adjustment to fit or to change for scale or to add, just add like vector stuff for like alpha points and stuff, all kinds of things that you'd have to pay someone for each time they touch it because their time is valuable hourly. I was able to learn how to do that, and I was forced myself to learn by making fake marketing pictures of a gnome photoshopped in with people that I wouldn't put them in now because it was 2012 and not now. I kind of did kind of raunchy, just thought that was funny. But I learned how to Photoshop stuff in with masking. I learned how to mask into Photoshop. I learned how to take small images and then cover them and use brush strokes to make borders, because with those things, once you learn one Adobe product, I learned InDesign. Well, it's similar, not exactly the same, but it's similar in terms of where you find the menus and how you find the things, the tutorials, and you find the places and familiar words. And then once I did InDesign, well, I need a video for Kickstarter. Well, I have Adobe Premiere. Now, it's not the easiest way to do it, but it's there, it's familiar, and you can do it. Like now they have like Premiere Rush and all kinds of great ways that they're just given to you. We have tools right now that 10, 15 years ago in Hollywood they didn't have. Like Final Cut Pro back then couldn't do half the stuff I can do in Premiere now at my house for what, $70 a month was what it is for personal, I think, right? Am I close?
You're around there, so.
Right. But that's what it costs to do that. You have an entire studio. I have After Effects. I use it. I make templates with it. I don't do anything fancy, but I make video intros for Frog God. Learning how to do all those things has saved me and now Frog God thousands and thousands of dollars. And it helps that I enjoy it a little bit, but it gets old when you have to do 300 images adjustments over the course of time. That's how you learn to do batch files. But that I think is extremely important because it gives you just enough really useful abilities that transfer everywhere. And like, for instance, if I was going to start like a small organized play group, like in 3 different stores in the area, and you wanted to have a living world that you had written, you could have handouts you could create with art on them, and you can add the boxes to make your own character sheets. All those things are available to you, but it would cost you a few $100s at least to do that for stuff that may or may not be successful. I mean, if you make a prototype that's pretty good, and then you say, okay, this has worked real well, I'm gonna have somebody or do something like that and make it better, and then you could use that for a launch. But without my skills to be able to put it down there, I was not be able to get what I wanted in the end. So, Lisa?
I dropped $5,000 on my video for my Kickstarter. $5,000, and yeah, it was professional. It was pretty sweet looking.
It was good.
I'd have done it for 500.
$5,000. I mean, I should have just done it myself.
I'm telling Bill, I don't want that.
I mean, it was because I was paying someone else to do it for me, so it was a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to do some of these skills yourself. Get the software, do it yourself. Yeah, you've got to get out of the comfort zone a little bit. You've got to learn the skill set, but you will save money, and you can trust yourself, hopefully. But, okay, so now you're laying out your own module or your own work. Another mistake I made. We laid out a Pathfinder module or two back in the day, and we had no idea back then that there were certain rules to how stat blocks should be laid out, should be stacked. And when we released this thing, oh, we were torn apart by the people that did know. So I would also say not only learn the software and the skills to actually get your work together, learn if there are certain rules for the rule set or the environment or the world that you are now creating content for. Because even if you, like, if we're doing like a 5th edition, your world, I guarantee that there are certain rules for how stat blocks should be handled, what fonts you should be using, what font sizes you should be using, what order things should be in. You need to learn these things. Otherwise, honestly, you'll put all of this hard work together and you'll publish it. And it doesn't matter even if you're just laying out a PDF and you're putting it on print on demand, so your costs are actually pretty low. Your rep is important, right? So you've got to make sure that the things you can control, that you learn about them up front so you can release something that is on the mark. We actually ended up pulling our products back off Lightning Press as fast as possible and rejiggered everything. But that was a mistake that we could have avoided.
That costs money.
That costs money.
And that brings me to, like, one of the reasons why you mentioned going to cons is that one of the things I've done for people who have asked, I have libraries and libraries in my Adobe Creative Cloud account of InDesign paragraph styles. And ones that even will automatically, if you have it set up a simple way, automatically do your Pathfinder with the line between the stat blocks with the feats and everything else. I had those. I've given them to people. I'm like, don't use this font, you know, but...
You never gave those to us.
You never asked. No, but I've given that to people, and I've given basic library tools I use for maps. Stuff that I know that Frog God owns, but we're willing to let people use, none of yours.
But I think the point, too, just in regards to systems, so like we all have a favorite system, write in the system that is a preference, and if you're looking to publish something in multiple systems, that doesn't always jive well. That's not always an easy jump, so...
It's expensive to do right.
It really, it's a pain to go back and try to change something from one thing to another. Like, it really just alters the whole flow and premise of your document.
We plan we plan large adventures. We plan them knowing we're going to put them in different systems, and we make decisions early on of what we will and won't do or how we're going to make these changes way before they get to the point where the manuscript's done.
And that's one with, like, we did one in Swords and Wizardry as a system, and our plan was to put it into 5th edition, and we looked at it after, and we're like, this is, like, we just have to start again from the beginning. Like, nope, we're just moving on. And it was a loss that we were willing to take with that, because it's like, all right, well, like, I'm willing to, it's not worth the effort.
It's less of a loss. It's one of those experience things that you have to learn or have somebody tell you, right? Learning that a layout for 5th edition, it looks way different than a layout for Swords and Wizardry. Both of those are going to take your time. Both of them are going to eat up your resources. But if you want to publish in both, you've got to get used to, I'm writing one book, and then I'm writing another book that is very similar to the first book with different rules. And that's what it is.
It's absolutely true. And like we have numerous people, like this is the Tome of Horrors. We made it intentionally. We made this time only in 5th edition. Why? Because it was a giant pain in the ass to go between two because of the SRD and the rules between creatures and making sure we're touching on everything. And honestly, when you make a page in 5th edition, right, this is really nice. Pathfinder page looks different, takes more pages. Swords and Wizardry page, there's a lot of blank. And in order to fix that, in the first ones we did, we added layer encounters, like 2 paragraphs worth.
That's a nice
That took a lot of time.
That stats look nice for that.
Yeah, they do. That's a really good job. No, but the whole layout is going to change in the style and the look. And some games are like going to be better with black and white art. Well, we can't afford 2 things of art. Not, at least not at the same time. I mean, these are expensive books to make, and so we have to make decisions. And we'd like to make everybody happy for everything. We'd love to publish every book we make in all systems, but sometimes Pathfinder's cost prohibitive, and sometimes Swords and Wizardry is.
I think, and even just saying, trying to make everybody happy is a good point with this. Someone's always going to dislike what you've done. And I think that, like, I don't mind reading that stuff because I guess I'm thick-skinned, but the best you can do is take something from it that you can make a positive into and say, like, all right, well, I get that they didn't like a format in that, and maybe try to adjust and see if it works. But, there's always going to be someone who dislikes that. Like,
And when you bring a manuscript or your adventure to somebody and you have them proofread it, you look for that information. You look for what they don't like. You don't want to just hear, oh, everything looks great. You want to know, I should use a serif font, or I should change this image, or whatever they see is wrong with it, you want them to tell you. And a lot of the times, your friends won't tell you. They want to support you. They want you to succeed. So they're like, everything looks great. And then you get to publishing it, and there's 7 grammar mistakes and an image that doesn't look right because it's a little bit off center, and you didn't notice it because you're too close to it.
And you didn't leave that little white border on the edge, but the other page had it, and you're...
And all of those things, those are the things that you want to hear from your friends. You need the people that you show it to be honest with how it looks.
And be able to take it well.
And friends can be good editors, which is what we've found. But you need to be specific about what you're asking them. So are you asking them to copy edit, which is not something you should probably trust your friends to unless they have like a master's degree in English, or they're like, that's a career thing for them and they're willing to help you out, or they've got experience with. Or are they editing for ideas, content flow, things like that, playability? And that's different. And I think that's all of us have read probably a million modules. Like you could hand it to any one of us and we'd be able to give you our gist on it. Do you think you could run it? And make sure to play test it too, I think is important.
Yeah. What about cartography?
One of the crazy things that I actually get over and over and over, so what I do now is I'm primarily a cartographer, right? Because I'm not dealing with scenarios anymore because it's too much of a pain in the ass. I'm a cartographer. So let's just say that I'm drawing some kind of artwork here. Let's just keep it generic. I am surprised how many single times that I ask my client, so what size is this piece? Oh, I don't know. Now, that should set off alarm bells for me. I just want a city. Right, now, I'll get back to city descriptions and stuff later on. Well, okay, is it, are we talking about, are we doing at least landscape? Are we doing portrait? Is it full page, half page? What size is the scenario? Let's start even there. What sort of borders have you got going on? 9 times out of 10 with the smaller publishers, never before, God. I don't know. Can you just draw me a map? I guess, letter-sized. Mm-hmm. Now, and I swear, 9 times out of 10, I'm handing something across where I don't know how they're going to use it, because they don't know how they're going to use it. And I have had times where I've seen the final module or the scenario, the book, whatever it is, and my map is squeezed in somewhere and the margins are wrong, and maybe, I've seen one where it was stretched and I was like, so if you have a sense up front, you should have a sense up front, right? But not only how many pieces of art you need, but where they're going. Don't just buy art blindly, because going back to these fine gentlemen's points, you'll spend money forever, okay?
And I think for us, art is the very last step.
Yep.
We don't even pursue that until we're done.
And then you're thinking in terms of, I need this 1/8 page, I need a 1/4 page, I need this, I need something that's 2 inches high, maybe a little bit of a landscape. Your map, you should have, it's going to be a full page, I need 1 inch all the way around, or I need 1/2 inch on these 3 sides, I need 1 inch down the spine. You should have a sense for what your dimensions are, and you're probably going to find that it's actually never 8.5 by 11.
And it lets you, so if you wait, truly wait to the end for art, because if you're writing, because it lets you splurge on the piece that you find that's going to be the centerpiece.
And everyone does it at the beginning, though.
Which is
everyone
backwards.
does it at the beginning. That's the crux. I have people now writing to me today saying, hey, would you be up for drawing me a map? I'm launching a Kickstarter, and I want the map for the Kickstarter. I want the art for the Kickstarter.
That was me. I know us too.
and they don't know how they're going to use it yet. They have no sense,
I
right?
know how to use it.
So, like Ian said, they're front-loading this stuff before they even know how they're going to use it in context.
That's a good point, especially with the tools that are available. For example, Adobe, when you have an account, gives you sometimes up to 10 free pieces of stock art that you could totally use in an InDesign file as a holding piece. I want something that looks kind of like this. You'd be amazed when you type in Orc Beach Sunset, what shows up. I'm not lying to you. There's things that, especially turn off the NSFW, stuff flies at you. But there's stock art that you're allowed, you can even just grab the preview version of that and put it in the InDesign file, and you can see your flow. And remember to count things like maps, tables, and offsets that are as elements of a page. You don't have to have a piece of art of a page or 2 pages, but you gotta have something more interesting than a big giant thing of text. And I can still see the one spread in Whisper and Venom that was nothing but text, right? But overall, I did a good job balancing it, and it wasn't all just art. And so that's important to keep that in mind and know the tools are there to help you wait to make decisions until you can, 1, know exactly what you want, and 2, afford it.
Unless you want to write that FOSSA Star Trek one that's just like literally walls of text.
Rocky? What next?
He's like, I don't know.
I don't know what. I don't think I have anything to say at the moment.
No, okay.
No, the art is important. So, thinking about buying art too, that's about what we do is we hold placeholders. And really in modules, when we started deciding what pieces we wanted something unique on, it let us guide it. So like we had, like in that Orbs one, we had a funky iron golem, which actually a review of said it, like the people were like, it's too weird. It was weird and cool.
Yep.
But we're like, this is weird and cool. This thing needs a picture. But we didn't know that when we were
designing it, right?
Because it wasn't, like, it didn't stand out to us in what we had typed as much as it stood out to other people who had looked at it. So, like, letting other people look at that and help you decide, like, well, that would be awesome. It lets you know where to dump that money that is a limited resource to find a piece that's going to make your module
Yeah. And when you're looking for art, find the thing that is different in your module from what everybody else has ever done. That's going to be the piece that's drawing the eye to it. It's going to be the piece that, you know, everybody's seen 500 Beholders. Everybody's seen 500 Orcs. Find something that is yours, that is a signature for you, that will possibly be recognized long term. You know, it could be the next Elithid, who knows?
So what I want to do is open for questions so far. So we have more we can go over. I do this like really professionally, and this is what I talk about all day, every day. And so I could go on forever and ever. But is there any specific questions about anything? Yeah.
So going back to what Alyssa said about like your formatting and how to, you know, to design things for different systems, how, like, where do you find that information on what is the design for like Pathfinder and 5th edition?
You can ask, or there are examples online you can find of, like I went to, I think James Sutter from Paizo had a page about that. He had a page about grep style searching. I mean, yeah, all kinds of stuff. It's available if you know how to search
SRDs do. All of the companies that are out there have publishing guidelines that they use that you could like try to get in your foot in the door and look at what they're doing. The guidelines often contain that. So like WotC has them. Swords and Wizardry does not.
And I was actually walking around last week with a tape measure and some of my old modules, measuring things out to see how they did it in the old days.
I did the same thing. So.
And sometimes it's just like we're going through and going, I'm going to look at the Giant series and see how they laid out this.
So, no, but honestly, any other questions? You had one, my turn. Yeah.
That doesn't matter. So I started a project recently at the beginning of the year where initially I wanted it to be a Kickstarter, publish a book.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like you said, I had all these bucket list items of things I wanted to get done and all that. And then I found a guy we partner up with, a good friend of mine, and it just occurred to us all of a sudden, why put, and I'm asking your opinion on
sure.
potential pitfalls in this, why put a whole bunch of effort into a short amount of time to do a proof of concept for the Kickstarter, to attract people, to market, all of that, get all the resources we need, for something that may not fund.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, let's make this a Patreon page.
Mm-hmm.
We're releasing content slowly over time, building up our audience and building up our material. If we want to actually publish it in a book in a year or two, we've got all of it done. So,
Alyssa can talk a little bit about those separate things. You just started setting one up, right?
And Patreon too, like, you need content continuously.
yeah, the format of this lends itself to that. But
So you.
do you think it's good, bad, something that I may not be seeing that might come back to bite me in the ass? Or?
I think we probably all have opinions on this. My opinion is I actually think that your work effort is going to be very similar. And I'm not talking about the actual work you do, but the social outreach that you've got to do. Because even a Patreon, you need an audience.
Yeah.
And you are going to have to work hard to build and acquire that audience. And I would argue, and I read a book actually by Monty Cook years ago about Kickstarter. Things have probably changed a little bit, but I think the golden rule is still very much the same. you've got to have your audience when your Kickstarter goes live. So either you're going to upfront build up an audience for a Kickstarter, or you're going to upfront over time build an audience for your Patreon. But I think your path is going to be the same. I personally like the idea of Patreon. If you've got content that lends itself to that, I think that's a very noble way to go, 100%, depending on what the actual product is. But I think your work effort is going to be all about getting that audience regardless.
But I think a good Kickstarter rule of thumb, and we debate this too.
Yeah, we haven't done a Kickstarter yet, and we're in process right now of discussing Kickstarter. So go ahead with your statement with that.
Because we always fight about whether to do it. But
let's go. I want to hear it.
Yeah. well, it's my thing is like so it has to be done.
Yeah.
By the time you press start on that Kickstarter, you need to be finished.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're getting into that quagmire that they were talking about, where you've made 20 grand.
You're going to
But
scarf
now
it
you owe
all
40
up.
grand because
It's not done.
Now you've got to pay somebody for layout because you've got a timeline. You got to pay somebody to get that art in there because you've got a timeline. All of these things are going to cost you time and money later.
And you have some examples to show that you come to the table not asking for money for a dream, but you're asking for money for a project that is not about to wrap up, but it can see an end goal that you understand.
Yeah.
We've seen so many Kickstarters now in gaming that most backers have a really good feel. Would be super surprised that they don't go, that one looks like a great idea, that giant Wizards of the Coast IP picture that, I know will get sued over. We know exactly what it is that we should consider red flags. And like the first one is, have you ever backed a project? If you see a creator with 0 backers, sometimes you're like, I don't know about this.
Yep.
Because the experience of backing, I backed 100 before I did it. I backed 100 and looked at every backer, the updates.
Did you know that?
She knew. No, she watched the packages come in. It was great. No, but I did. And sometimes for $1. I mean, I was just in for the updates, just because I wanted to see how they went, like a Pathfinder one. And I didn't know who Wolfgang Bauer was, but I backed his. He seemed like an up-and-coming guy. But it's important, yeah.
Yeah, if you have an idea for a game, and would there be any real downside to using like stock art?
Not at all.
Not at all.
And say
Nope.
stretch goal, hey, we're
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
That's a great way to do it because honestly, the stock art, there's so much.
And it's cheap.
And it's
And
readily available.
It's really available, and I guarantee you, the chances of somebody else having used that one from Adobe Creative Cloud that you needed of that kobold standing on the beach is low.
And so there's two aspects to that. So you look at someplace like Drive-Thru RPG, you can get really good at stock art for very reasonable prices. That is almost specifically what you're looking for.
We've used that a lot in
Quite a
our
bit.
stuff.
And we get it and I mean that's what most of our profits from all of our PDF releases is just like, hey, let's buy more stock art.
Yep.
Because we can then have it. Nothing wrong with that. Because I guarantee you that the 3 of you who noticed that we used the same picture as he did, like the rest of you won't. You're like, oh, it's a goblin. Let's keep reading. Like it's not that big a deal. And that sort of thing really lets you splurge on if you're going to dump money into it on something bigger. The other thing that they're talking about so Adobe prices, I don't know how many of you have used Adobe, but like you can get for so for an investment of about $600 a year, you can get a Creative Cloud license that you could easily share with a buddy or whatever your team is, whoever you decide to do this with. And you can get stock art licenses from them. And those don't disappear per month. So every month you get 20 of them.
It's great.
Yeah, so you're like, ooh, and then you can cash those in. And like he said, there is a lot on there. Like we just pulled some stuff off where like we need an ice demon picture. I'm like, that looks good. That's in Adobe stock art.
Landscapes,
you think it's just people jump roping and families swinging and have a pic, but it's not. Like there's
literally
amount in there.
millions of images.
But
on there.
the other ones are there though. If you're gonna do marketing, and I did a whole thing with the Quest of Doom 4 where I found happy couples hanging out. We did Rappahannock. I did happy couples visiting Rappahannock because I wanted something different and funny. But you know how many times you can find happy couples on there? Tons. Every happy couple you imagine walking in a cave. I didn't know that'd be a thing, but there's a lot.
It's there.
And so I recommend that. Yeah.
Just a little suggestion of something that I've been doing in my project to make my artist knows that he's not getting paid a lot. He knew what he signed up for. But I make it easier for him by either finding the exact image I like,
Yeah.
or drawing a map myself. And all he has to do is trace over and make it look good.
No, that's
It's great.
Yeah, when you're
Saves you a lot of money.
when you're dealing with artists, the more specific you are, the better your image is going to look at the end. You can't, like Alyssa was saying, she's looking for specific things, and if you don't know those things, it's not going to turn out like what you're imagining in your head.
I love the clients, and I'm sorry, clients, but I love the clients that will say to me, hey, I need a city. Okay, great. Tell me about this city. Well, it's positioned on the east coast of Faroon, and to the west, there's another city that's its trade partner, and there's a council of 3, and I'm sitting there with a pen in my hand going, but what am I drawing here?
What does the roofs look like, right?
Right. So yeah, the more specific you can be, sketch
Examples.
some examples,
Bullet
the
points,
better.
bullet
It
points.
makes everything quicker.
For a project that we've just about finished, I literally, with the guy who's doing some art for us, one of the guys, I said, he goes, well, what do you want this guy to look like? I said, I want it to look like this guy that we both know as a lady. And he looked at it, he goes, all right, no problem. Like, but that was all it took, was something that was like in there that he needed to know what our vision was. And I think like that's a huge point. You're right, that like anything you can do to make that job easier, otherwise you won't be happy.
Sum that up by saying have good reference material for your artists.
Yeah.
I'll say a couple of things I want to add that are not directly related to publishing the book or publishing the product, and it's probably more related to if you're going to stores to either push an idea like an Adventures League thing, or you have a game you want to really. Honestly, some of the best. If your long-term goal is to publish something, go to the store and play an organized play game with people you don't know, and play it with cool handouts and things like that. And one of the ways to get those, let me tell you that, I am the king of whatever I could pass out to get attention. I did cocktail napkins, I did swizzle sticks, I've done postcards with funny gnome sayings, I've done miniatures. I started GaryCon 2013 with a single gnome miniature that I got cast at Valiant from one sculpt I bought from a picture that Jeff D did that I saved over the course of time to get to. I had to put them in little plastic baggies that when I bought them at Hobby Lobby by the 500s, they thought I was selling drugs. No, but I was clipping to a little business card, and everybody I met at GaryCon, I must have bored to death because there were only 350 of us then. And I would hand everybody a gnome. Like, hi, I'm Zach Glazar. I'm having a Kickstarter coming up, and here's a gnome. And that gnome went everywhere. They actually told me that's one of the largest runs they ever have a single figurine. I only had one figurine. I had one little piece of art from Jeff D. Those two things, I used that for months. That's why I would like mask him into pictures of people that were kind of evil, but not too evil, like Hugh Hefner. I would mask him into there to bring attention, because I was small enough to not, worry about the copyright stuff, but also it was a way to utilize what I had. And then from those pictures, I would do a look at places like Vistaprint. So you can make cards, you can make half-page cards. Even if Frog Guy, I still use those. I make these character cards for Swords of Wizardry Light. One day I'm like, it would be easier to play a game if I had a character card. I used art that existed from Frog God and some actually stock art. I made the cards of a certain size. One side I had the rules from Swords of Wizardry Light on it, and the back was just the tables. But you can do that with anything you want to hand out, and they're 37 cents each when you buy 100. And knowing that's possible, it makes it way easier to print that than to go and try. I'm going to laser print copies of this on paper that everybody's seen 50 times. I even did this. I brought this to show just because it's interesting. One day I was looking for art, and I was like, what can I do with Vistaprint? And this came up, and I thought it was hysterical. The shower curtain. Actually, I did Alyssa's map is where I did. This is a piece of art from Frog God. But we use these actually in booths, and for maps, you put them on tables. They're waterproof. They don't stain very much, and they actually wind up looking pretty cool, especially with maps. And I found that looking for postcards. And they have all kinds of other things. They have bedspreads. Right? No, but the different kinds of things you can print on, I don't mean necessarily this, but you can print on the postcards. You can print on presentation folders. If you're doing maps or handouts to people at a game, at a convention, you can get presentation folders made that you can completely do the art, both the inside and the out, and you put business cards in there, all kinds of little things, but you can have a way to differentiate yourself. When businesses that do millions of customers buy presentation folders, there's a cheaper way to get that than to go to get 10 at a time. There's ways to get it online, and once you have the files, you can reuse that file everywhere.
And I would even say avoid Vistaprint. So go.
No, I know, but
so go local.
Go local, but
and remember this word too: is that the best you can do? Like, so these shirts printed. I printed like 50 of these, and got a price and said, "Is that the best you can do?" And got 20% knocked off.
And
and it was still like 40% of what Vistaprint would have cost me.
And this keeps that accountability that Alyssa was talking about earlier in hand. Dealing with the local printer, I can drive down there and be like, hey, where's my stuff at this week, right? Did you have a question?
Yeah, any advice for building your audience?
Boy, I can tell you that I started out by handing out gnomes. No, I'm serious. That's how I started out. I handed one to Aaron Leader from Noble Knight, and he actually bought from a Kickstarter because I had the guts to come up to somebody that had a bigger company. I was nobody. Hand him a gnome. I was with my wife in Berkeley, and there's a game store there, and I had a gnome in my pocket. Seriously, I had a gnome in my pocket. But I would go to game. It's kind of weird, but I go to game stores and hand it out to the owners and say, I'm such. But I've been in stores where someone was looking for a gnome figurine, and like a really creepy guy, I'm like, hey, guess what? I got a gnome here right in my pocket. And it was like, I felt like next step was playgrounds, right? I was really weird. Talking to people at first, I friended everybody in the world on Facebook, and I still accept those kind of friends requests, even though I'm not promoting myself necessarily anymore so much as meeting other people in the industry. But I will friend anybody because I like to see the opportunity to get it spread around. And I will share what I think are cool images or products by people I really don't even know, but I can tell they did their legwork and they made kind of an interesting pitch. And you just got to keep doing it. And you have to get over cold calling. It's just too bad. A sales job, as much as you think game design is you're writing in your basement, making the greatest thing ever, and the world's going to love it, they'll never know about it. Drive-Thru RPG gets hundreds of titles a month. Most of them get 10 downloads unless people push them, and it's hard. But the tools are in Drive-Thru to do that. There are tools available to you. There are companies that do it. We use one at Frog God, but there are ones that are a little bit smaller that will help you. But once again, that's a trust thing, because marketing is, you think there's snaky people in art. Man, you should see the marketing. But there are people who will help. I mean, if you're looking for a service that does that stuff, I could tell you what we do and how we did it. If you want to know, I did Facebook ads. And I did it to the point where it helped me. But once you get to a certain size, Zach is not good enough at marketing to go, okay, we're going to A/B test these ads. And then we're going to go ahead and find our audience, and this one has worked and this one hasn't. What are good terms? These guys do this all the time. So it's knowing when I'm big enough to afford something that I'm not going to ruin my chances by doing it by me. Like maps. I love making maps. I don't make any maps worth publishing. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do. And although I did tell her to make, I gave her a size for it, like, big as you can make it. And that's truth, I did.
And I would say also run games at conventions.
Mm-hmm.
And even more concrete is blogging.
Yeah.
Start blogging your stuff.
Yeah.
But running a game at convention, you get 6 to 8 players at the game. They all enjoy it. They're going home and telling their friends. They've all got a game group at home. So that's 64 potential people that have heard about you just from running one game.
And you never know
at a
who's in a
convention.
convention game. I mean, you
Right.
really never know who. I mean, I'm at conventions. I don't play games often, but when I'm in games, I remember things. And I'm always on the lookout for writers or for ideas and we don't stealing ideas. We're actually looking for creators, right? You don't know who's sitting down, especially if you're not that familiar with the convention you're at. But I find one of the most important parts is I'll meet people I smoke. I hate to say this, I don't advocate it to anybody. Everybody I've met that I thought was super cool in person, I met here smoking. Because you actually talk to people, but you can also talk to them inside too. No, but seriously, the interaction of who you talk to and the interaction you never know. Like for instance, Necromancer Games is where we started for Frog God. And my boss, he met somebody by the name of Mike Merles, who made this module. And so it's a connection he still kind of has, that because he'd done this here, he had worked his way to doing more and more. And his story was different than anybody else's might be, but he could be in your game now, and the next thing you know, Ian could be in charge of Wizards of the Coast. You don't know. I know.
Can I also add then something
please.
to this?
Yeah.
So I actually launched a Patreon about 2 weeks ago. So I'm in that exact boat, okay? I was officially actually going to do it on GaryCon, but they approved it like that. So I was like, oh, shoot, I'm live. Okay. I don't have my audience yet. What do I do?
Well, we backed you before you even started, some of us.
So this is what I'm going to do, and this is the mistake I made, and the mistake is a personality trait of mine, and this is what you have to overcome. First thing, I did a Facebook ad. We hate Facebook ads, but I did a Facebook ad. You can control your budget for it.
And
I did a Facebook ad for, hey, my Patreon is now live, and it links directly to Patreon. And now Facebook isn't penalizing that because you're paying them, right? It was like $20 or something, for 20 days. I set my budget for that. And I was like, yeah, I can do $20, $40. I mean, whatever. That got some backers. Then I'm doing it again, and I'm probably going to do it every single month for the year. And I'm going to swap out the ads, and I am going to do A/B split testing because I'm a little bit knowledgeable on that side of things. And I'm just going to run constantly ads going all of the time. That's one channel. The other channel is I've got a network. This is the bit I didn't tap into because I'm English. I stand in a queue behind people. I'm polite. I don't want to be rude. The food's wrong, but let's just suck it up. It'll be fine. That's England, right? And you can't do that. You can't do that. I've got friends in the industry, right? Oh, not you. But I've got friends in the industry. I've got network people. I've got people I've worked for over the years. I've worked for Monty Cook, right? I've worked for Wolfgang.
True.
I can actually write to these guys and say, hey, dudes, I've just launched a Patreon. I assume they don't know. They're busy guys. They don't know, right? And ask them, can you give me a shout out?
We do it every time.
What's the worst that could happen? And I did not do that. I'm going to, right? And then the other thing is,
her without her asking.
The other point is, what was just touched on here, go to conventions. Not only it builds your network, there's part of this, right? Builds your friends, it builds people that you can reach out to, builds possible customers. Tomorrow I'm going to be running a mapping seminar. I'm going to be handing out business cards to every single person there on a map. To Zach's point, handouts, right? This is who I am. This is what I do. Here's a little business card with my little Patreon on right there. And just do that.
She has maps on the back of her card. She already had the content to make a card cool, and then that's all part of it.
And I'll totally show you it too, because on moo.com, it was free to do reverse printing, and every reverse can be different. So every back of my cards is a map, a different map.
So, but I think, so in regards to that, if you don't have money to purchase an advertising company to do that, like her idea is good. You want your voice out there. So you want to start like blogging some of your ideas. So we blog, we probably get between 600 and 1,200 reads for most of our blog posts.
That's good. Posting one a week right now.
And we try to do, we have ideas. We're going to do 4 this week, and we're going to, but it's always, we just like, and especially if you're working with another guy, like you can make whatever your company name is a Gmail account for free. That costs you $0. You can make a blogging site there for free. And then you can start joining some of those Facebook groups and start, take turns, put 6 of them in the bank before you start so that you could, at least your first month or 2, you can do 1 a week on a regular-ish basis and start pushing them out.
And cross-pollinate too.
Yeah.
And
right?
interact.
You don't just do a blog. You put your blog on Facebook.
On MeWe. G+ is going away, but make sure people are seeing it. I'm in 15 different Dungeons and Dragons groups on Facebook. Know the rules on them. Know which ones allow you to post your blog there. Know which ones allow you to put links.
And ask for
those
feedback.
Links in there every week.
Start conversations.
Yep. And if you don't start conversations, at least comment once a day.
There's someone I'm working with now. He's not a client. This is just I was just giving advice to him. He's got a great product that he's thinking about kickstarting, and he only posts news to his Facebook page. That's it. His Facebook page probably has 20 people following it. So what's his potential audience? 20 people.
Well,
What should he be doing? Post it to his wall, sure. Post it to a blog.
Share it to the
yeah,
Share it out. That's what you've got to do.
You want these things seen by as many people. The best way to build that audience, make sure you're visible.
And get your voice familiar.
Yeah, make sure you're visible. Make sure online, in person, run at friendly local game stores, right? If you're traveling for work, stop in to play Saturday D&D, bring those business cards, talk to them, say, find me on Facebook. Do everything you, just keep putting yourself out there. Every way you can feasibly do it, do it.
To piggyback on, because that's like the gathering your audience and building your network and stuff, that's something that I pay, especially online, paying close attention to. If you're starting a blog, if you're starting a vlog, if you're starting to post all of your stuff online, consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Say, because Rocky did Monster Mondays, he's doing Trap Tuesdays right now.
Yep. Every week.
there's a new article.
Every week
And
they're
so
looking for that, and
you might go, hey, I've got 4 articles, and I publish them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you're like, oh, I don't have anything else. But if you go, I have 4 articles, that's 4 weeks of publishing every Monday,
And
they're coming back.
there are
It's time
tools to
look
make
at
that effective. Do we have any questions? I'm going to move on to marketing, just a little bit more about online communities. For instance, I'm going to go from here. Discord. Anybody familiar with Discord? Frog God, we had a Discord. The guy who set it up still works with us, but we weren't good at it. We didn't know what it was. We were a little bit too old. But he found another guy even older than me that was open to the idea that, I'll do it, and I'll actually do what you say. So a guy named John Barnhouse, who had worked with me a bit, went to go work with Eric Stein, who Eric Tenkar, notorious Eric Tenkar. They built a community that is now up to 17 or 1,800 people who visit continually. We have a channel in there. He allows people who are publishers to have a channel. And people can come and ask you questions, and as long as you're checking when people post, you can reply. And you can build a community within one. And it's kind of really great, because once you're in Discord, you can join the Fantasy Grounds community. If you're making adventures or you're making like tokens, a lot of artists make tokens for games, so they make top-down terrain. That's where you will meet communities of people that you're actually interacting with in a friendly way that isn't like Facebook is. It's different. It's not better, but it's different, and it's available, and there are communities that already want you to show up. I assure you, Eric Tenkar, he loves the fact that people come as part of his community, make a creator's channel, and then contribute. And we have a weekly voice chat that I go to not as often as I should, but it's, we have a guy who does.
There's a frog there every Tuesday night.
Every Tuesday night, we're answering questions about current Kickstarters, about product, and we even have, you shipped me a book and it's damaged. Hey, yeah, sorry, please contact this is our guy. And it's hard to keep track of the number of channels we're in, but they're all important. And so I encourage you to look at communities like Discords, Fantasy Grounds. The forums still exist, and there's people in there. They're kind of old and crotchety, but they spend money. And they care deeply about Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games. And if you communicate, if you answer their questions, or you even notice that your company has been mentioned at all, you come back and you say, hey, I see what you're saying, and if this was, I think this would improve it, and what do you think? Because interaction, everybody I see at a convention has played Dungeons and Dragons for 20 years, okay? They've all have really strong ideas on how important tieflings are, right? It doesn't matter what you pick, right? They all have an opinion, but their opinions are as valid as my own. I may have more experience with the publishing end, but their opinions on Dungeons and Dragons may outweigh mine by a lot. And so I want to listen. And people, when they think they're being listened to, will tell you not what you want to hear, but will actually tell you stuff you should know, and that makes you a part of a community. Just showing up at a forum and saying, hey, I'm me, please go to my Kickstarter, will get you exactly 0 votes and being booted out of it. But being and engaging long-term in online communities is great. Going to your local game store is equally great, because people there have friends everywhere. They play in a Discord, they play in a group on Roll20, and they have people all over the world. Oh, I'm on this Kickstarter, I'm doing X. And you never know where that networking is, not just local anymore. So those kind of communities matter, and it matters in a way depending on what you're trying to make. Because if you're making art, you're going to find more creators on a Discord channel full of creators than you are going to find people in your game store. But if you're making games, you go where it is. So you have to tailor it, but there's not one place to be. There's not one way to do it. I put up flyers in unrelated stores because I didn't know what I was doing, but I wanted to feel like I was doing something every day. Now I wish I was not doing something every day, but I do it every day for hours and hours.
I just run into too. The Cartographers Guild is a good place to find a map maker with a reputation who has experience and work, and usually clear rates as well.
Or learn to be one.
Or or find yourself a really good map maker and apprentice yourself to them forcibly.
The other point I want to touch on for sure is that if your route is not to be an entrepreneur, one of my partners is one of the reasons we have an OSR is Matt Finch. He's one of the other principals of Frog God. He worked on Osric, and Swords and Wizardry is is ours now, but that's how he came to Frog God. And some of you are familiar with it, I imagine. First edition D&D redone. He is part of Frog God because he could not stand talking to people for customer service and shipping boxes. He hated that. But my CEO, Bill Webb, he loves talking to people more than he loves anything in the world, and he loves shipping boxes. I don't. God knows why, but he has a giant warehouse on his property, and he sees that as the visual aspect of success. You're watching product go out the door. You're making sure it's there. You know that people are responding to you in many, many channels, sales channels in there. So he loves that. So he does that. Go with what you're good at. If you want to work, if what you want to do is produce books that get read by the biggest number of people, you would be best suited trying to become a freelancer for an author for a bigger publisher or another publisher, and not spend your time on what you hate. Because if you don't want to own a company and do every aspect of it, you want to be a great writer for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, do that. And have people evaluate it, and then talk to people, and don't be afraid of rejection, but be the guy that they can't live without. Because I assure you, there are people I rely on that, oh man, this has to happen soon. I better call Edwin, you know. And you be that guy, because you know, that girl or that you have to be so reliable that all of a sudden you're part of a company, you don't even realize it, and you may not be an owner or be a profit sharing person, but when they need someone to write something, they're going to ask, and finally they'll ask, hey, what do you want to write? And that's an avenue. If you want to be an artist and someone needs art and that's not your style, you give it a shot for them, because they will give you the opportunity.
I think so. Something else that we haven't touched on is, and you're talking about partners, is if you're going to partner with someone, especially at something that might grow, make sure that you can fight with them.
Yeah,
and that sounds weird and ugly, but make sure that you guys can like totally argue about something and still be okay.
It's important. We fight all the time about different things.
They do.
Stupid stuff too.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, that argument leads to a better product for us. You know,
our last one was because he changed my fur trapper into a farmer, and I was pissed off.
I think the last one was a font.
Rightly so. Yeah. Well, maybe a font for you, but the font meant nothing to me.
And those little things that we're talking about, fur trapper, farmer, which font we're going to use, those are the little details that change a book from
good to great.
Good to great, okay to bad. You know, it slides the scale up just a little bit or down a lot, actually. Those little details matter. And if you're working with people, you've got to be able to hash out those details and make them the best decision you can.
And find someone, if you're going to partner with someone that complements your skills. Like, I'm terribly colorblind. I can do InDesign layout, but I don't make any color decisions because I just can't. And I know that. And I'm like, if he says change this, I just go okay. Like it's not something that I recognize that he's better at certain things than me, and we stick to those things.
I'm not even colorblind, and I won't make color decisions. I mean,
yeah.
Seriously, he's absolutely right. Knowing what you can't do, is why you actually would pass it off, and you save that for when you can afford it, or you leave it out. You leave out that aspect of an adventure. Not every adventure has to have everything for everybody. So, any other questions? We have plenty of advice. I assure you, we can keep talking. Yeah, go ahead.
Going back to like the earliest point. Sorry.
Sure. No, absolutely. No, please.
But she said always make sure to know when to say no and to set goals.
Right.
And not to extend yourself too far.
We live in it. Yeah.
How do you make the decision of what's too far? Of what is the little thing you can fit in there that will make it better? And what is too far that's going to take up just too much time?
Don't be me. No, honestly. No, honestly, I looked at it when I did it because I wasn't really wired into the community at all. But I figured I was my absolute best target market. I wanted to sell what I wanted to buy and no one made. But I know that the things that I cared about, I could see how much will I pay, basically. Start with that. What's the amount I want to charge? How much does it cost to make it? And is that half of what I'm going to be able to ask for, right? There's a formula to all that, and I could get into that later depending on how you're selling stuff. But you really have to look at your resources around you. Even if you think that this would be, ideally what I want is this. I want a miniature and a box set and this and this. Well, I also have 2 jobs, a wife, and I'm going to get my law degree. It's hard. Ask people who know, and honestly, start and see, and then you can set a ceiling. Because I started writing to make 32 pages. I wound up making 180.
So, And I think even more concretely, if you're looking to publish something yourself that you want to print, the first thing you do is figure out how much that you can afford to spend without hurting your lifestyle and
At all.
livelihood.
And not even, you only hurt a little bit, because the one thing that will kill any dream you have is the day that somebody that you relies on you says, I think this is taking too much of your time. And what that does is it deflates all the value you put into it and the desire you have to do it. If they don't have a buy-in, you can't ever get it done, and it's hard. Some people will never get to buy-in the same way. It's just what it is.
There's two limiting factors. There's money and time.
Yeah.
Money's a hard cap. Time, if you build those networks, you'll find somebody that knows InDesign well enough to give you a shortcut to save that half hour of time getting that whatever you need correctly, just perfect. So build that network, and that'll help a lot with the time aspect, but there's not much, you know what your hard limit is on money.
So, and so in regards to writing too, like I make sure that I have at least 2 or 3 times a week. So generally Wednesday night, I always write something, or edit something. And generally Thursday night I do, and then Sunday is my maybe day. But every week I make sure I'm doing.
Yep.
So you know you have those 3 days, but you want a product in 6 weeks, you know
Yeah.
how much you can literally
Yep.
do.
So I know I've got like 8 hours of typing in me that I can conceivably do in a week without it messing up my regular life.
And I'm the opposite of that. I'm mostly stay-at-home dad with a part-time job, so I can put 30 hours a week in. If we're getting close to a deadline and he's short, I can sit down and hammer 10,000 words out over the course of 4
And
days.
without being resentful, because
Right.
understanding where everybody's at in open communication is really important. I had a partner when I started, lesser known, which was my company I had, and we went through one box set, and then it wasn't going to work, and it was really heartbreaking. He was a long-term friend, and all he ever wanted to do was to write books and edit books, and he was really a words guy, and I don't speak to him now. We have no communication at all, because he made commitments that he absolutely wasn't going to follow through with, and never was able to tell me so. And by the time it became almost irreparable, I had to completely retool where we're at to make sure I could still meet my deadlines. And like I said, I've had one communication with him since then. And so beware, just know that it's hard. One of the reasons that I actually I've been thinking about this, and why I suggested this to Gary Con, was at Frog God, we have tons of intellectual property that is dusty. It just sits there. And so I thought I wanted to be a creator my entire life, just in the back of my head at least, and not having the tools was just really frustrating. And so we're going to do something about that. And this isn't a sales pitch so much as knowing that times are changing, there are digital tools coming, and we have 2,500 pieces of black and white line art that has not been used since 2008 from Necromancer Games and Frog God Games. We have a Kickstarter we just had that just passed the stretch goal to where we're going to open up our setting IP to third-party publishers, and we're not going to ask you for anything. We just want you to write in our world. Please don't make it pornographic. No pornography, no politics, and no just being a jerk. Okay, that's really our requirements. It'll be more specific, but you can use our IP. You can even write extra levels to our biggest stuff. There's an 18-month window. There's a couple other requirements, but in general, if you think the Tome of Horrors is great, write monsters just like it. We're gonna have a place for you to put them. If you want to put them on our place and put a link to your stuff, please do. We would encourage you, if you really like it, we'd like to include it in our stuff. We'd like to buy it from you if you don't have to sell it. But part of that is we're gonna have a small program where you can join in for different levels, but it includes access to the art, like not just the art, like 72 DPI, like 300 DPI TIFF files that are at 10 gigabytes or 10 megabytes, right? And those kinds of things, and places where like I'll probably talk like this once a month on like sort of a Patreon chat, but it's not quite, about how I did InDesign or how I do this. And we have a guy that does nothing but layout, and he will talk to you about that forever. I warn you that he won't stop, and he'll go in 1,000 miles an hour, but you have access to a guy who has 20 years experience.
And he'll say, well, that's stupid.
Yeah, he will.
Doing something
But I'll be honest with you, having access to a guy with 20 years experience laying out RPG books is pretty tough.
Yep.
Right? And because we want creators to be successful. We really do. The best products that are made, you never know who's going to make the best stuff. A rising tide does lift all boats. The best creators are going to make other publishers better. You're going to meet cool people. You're going to play in fun games. And so we're going to make that available, and we want to work with other companies. We have some that we're working with to make it happen. But like our art's going to be there. We're going to be able to give you some advice. We'll probably have some articles by Matt Finch about the legal aspects of it. We'll talk about if you're actually at the point where you're going to make books in China, we make books in China. And we can talk about what it takes, why you should or shouldn't, how much it costs, how much warehousing space. You don't have to ask yourself, I'm going to buy 3 pallets of books. All right. Awesome. Do you have a pallet jack? You got to get one. You know, these are really, they seem mundane, but we want to grow a community around, you know, obviously Wizard has the DMs Guild, you know, and they charge a percentage, they won't let you publish here and there, and that's their right, and they're wise to do so. But we have the ability outside that to have a community that does much the same, but gives you the access to learn how to do it and the tools to do it. Yes, we're not going to give you the art from the New Tome Horrors. You know, we like it, we're proud of it. But we're going to give you the art from the Necromancer Games that does the same thing for you, gives you black and white. Every monster you could possibly imagine, it could be on that list. You know, and people may reuse them, but that is far superior than, you know, me drawing it for you or anything else. And so we'll have levels and tiers for that so we can help. But you advise other people in the community, because it's not necessarily me you want to talk to. There are people who are much better at it, that have been doing it longer, that aren't doing it at, you know, as often and as many hours a day, you know. But we want to see that. And I know Fantasy Grounds encourages people to convert adventures to their, you know, their client. And the more adventures we see from everybody, the more monsters we see, the more challenges we see, it's a new renaissance. I mean, we are living now in the best time ever to be playing Dungeons and Dragons. I don't like to watch usually streaming games, and I find myself watching Critical Role and what because they're making millions of dollars. But you know what? Whoever thought you'd make millions of dollars being watched on TV playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? If you want to make a stream and play a streaming game, if you use our products, we're going to hook you up, right? Because we want people to see it and do it and play it and enjoy it, and you can really get a feel for everything that is being done. We encourage everybody to do it because the tools are cheap. They're cheap in terms of compared to what they were. Laying out a book and getting one out on PDF especially is so cheap, and we want to make it where it's not just cheap, it comes with good advice, and so you can make stuff that we all want to play. And so, more questions, we have a little bit more time.
I think, so one more thing that's very important, I think, is read the OGL.
Yeah.
Very closely.
Know what you can touch and what you can't touch.
The SRD and the OGL are, they're
We make mistakes at Frog God on that still. We have writers who worked for Wizards of the Coast who turn stuff in that have things on there that will get us sued out of oblivion.
Like, know what monster, because the monster list, everybody panics like it's huge. It's not huge.
It's short.
I mean, there's some couple cool ones that you can't use, but make sure you know what they are.
Yep.
Make sure you understand how to give credit to other creators that you've used their content, so it's open content.
And that's in, like, same as the stock art. Like, the guy you bought the stock art has, or a woman you bought the stock art from has, like, hey, this is my copyright, put it in there, and make sure you do.
You can't use that, like, you can't use stock art to make new stock art packages, right? There are very many things that you can't do with stock art, but you can use them in an adventure, no problem.
But most of them, too, you can reverse the image, too, if you're looking to make it look different, and just flip it. It's just, it sounds stupid, but it's like, suddenly it's a little bit different than everybody else's.
No, and there's tricks like that I like to show people. Like I use tricks with layout pages and art that I learned from Chuck, where we take the old art, black and white, that we have from the City of Brass. This is the one we're just coming out soon. The last page of each one, because it's a blank page, we take the old Necromancer Games art, we take it opacity of 50%, throw a multiply blend layer, and then we color overlay. I mean, he has a very specific example of Save Style. I learned from her by looking at her files. I felt like I was like looking at her windows at her house. But a dissolved line across this grid. I mean, that was the coolest thing I ever saw. I was so excited when I found that out, and I told you, like, oh my gosh, that's the only use for dissolve I ever saw. But those kinds of things, you know, once you get in those kind of communities and see it, making stuff really is its own reward. I'm not paid a ton at Frog God. I do really well for the industry because of the nature of how we do it. But when I was making very little, I looked at the box shut on my shelf that I was very proud of that reminded me of the stuff I used to buy, and it was satisfying. That was the very first thing in my life I started and finished. That was not a job I had to go do, but a project that I wanted to see done. And everybody here could do it with the tools available because they're so much better now than they were 8 years ago.
Yeah, and don't do it if you're not having fun. I mean, that's what it's really about.
That wasn't fun. I had a great time after the end. Once it was done, it was awesome. No, but there's a slog. There are points when it's a real slog. I had to lay out Whisper and Venom 3 times in 6 weeks. So I learned how to do it, and then I did it again. And then I like, wow, you can text wrap using these the pen tool. I did it again. Wow, you can use master pages and have bleed going out, and you have color on the page. And do it again. And finally, I'm like, I'm done, right? But you'll find doing a slog, it will teach you so much about it that you're that much better. But the flip side of that is I shouldn't have done that. And I would tell you that if you asked me advice now, I would tell you, do your bleed next time, do the color bleed next time, do the wrap next time, do what you're good at. But it's whoever your path is, but there are people around you that I encourage you to ask. Even if you don't know them, I get asked questions all the time. If you catch me on Facebook and I have 20 minutes, I'll tell you exactly what I think. It may be a long time till I respond sometimes, but I want people to know, because people help me. Jeff Talanian, for all the bad things I say about him, I wear his shirts. He's the one who told me that how to get a box set. And it was made Marion Paper Box Company in Indiana. That's how he made a box set. He got me in contact with them. They're the only company that didn't say $18 a box. Right? They said $5. That saves so much time and effort.
And everything you produce is going to get better. So just like don't hang yourself up on some of the ones that like the form you're like, because you'll look at them later and go, oh my God.
Yep.
Like, what did I do with that layout?
Not me.
Why
It's all
was I
awesome.
thinking
No.
that? And just like keep
laid it
pushing
out 4
forward.
times.
Like as long as everything is a little bit better and is getting there, like you're doing well. And it's not something to feel bad about or to give up over. As long as you've learned the trick, then keep going.
And I would suggest doing PDFs for your first 3, 4, 5 modules only. Don't go print until you've gone through this learning experience a few times. Because when you do a PDF, you can always just go back, change what you want, and then re-release it as an updated PDF. Once it's out there in print,
It's
and
there
it's
forever.
on those dead trees,
That spelling.
that's what it
That
is.
spelling mistake on the back of your box never goes away, even though nobody ever tells you about it.
Yep.
It's always there. We're going to wrap this up pretty soon, but I wanted any more questions first before we have some last thoughts,
Comments?
questions.
What kind of stuff are you guys working on?
Yeah, yeah. You can ask them. That's actually a good idea. It's your turn.
All right, so but are you doing modules? Or are you doing? You said you got like a setting book coming.
It's a weird. Zach you might have seen me share it on Facebook.
Yep.
It's a fantasy cookbook for how to cook monsters.
All right,
That's awesome.
Oh, that's great.
That sounds amazing.
Because
Yeah.
it's a hidden character. A friend of mine actually played this character in D&D. It's a gay halfling chef.
That's awesome.
But I came up with the idea because somebody asked me what would cave troll taste like. I'm like, I don't know, but
Not chicken.
Gamey.
But it goes with.
Yeah, it pairs nicely with.
monsters, and every month now on Patreon, every month it's a short story of how he came to cook this monster, usually involving terrible failure and
No, that sounds great.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That beautifully lends itself to Patreon.
art, a recipe that my partner in this, he's a culinary school, whatever, so it's real recipes to cook at home and
Substitute
a little bit
chicken.
of pain
Yeah, right.
of what does it do to your character when you eat cave troll?
Nice.
The caves, the trolls cave, the map of it, things like that.
Nice.
You see, I
That
would
sounds
build your
awesome.
audience on Patreon,
Yeah.
like using that for like a year or two, and you will have thousands of people just loving the
No,
stuff that you're
that-
coming out with, and you'll get to a point where you'll be, guys, let's do a
book.
Kickstarter, and we're going to make a book. Taking all of the content from the last 2 years, we're going to drop in some color artwork,
And throw a
and it will
banquet here and
go
go to it.
I'm
gangbusters.
hoping Larry is still alive because Larry already wants to do the cover for the book. So.
All right. Well,
Well, right on.
I'm
right
pulling,
on.
I'm pulling for him too.
I'm hoping Larry's still
What else?
alive.
What else? Yeah.
I'm procedurally generating monsters for 5th edition.
Awesome. That's awesome.
And it's already
Excellent.
inside of the book.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Would you find it hard to actually make the book part? 'Cause I assume you know how to program well enough to procedurally generate them. That was
Yeah,
probably not near as
I
hard as
wrote
it.
it.
Right on. Yeah. Excellent.
And then it doesn't actually use InDesign at all. It
But,
actually.
yeah,
uses something
XML?
I wrote.
Yeah. Awesome. That's really cool.
I just started self-publishing in November.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of similar. I did play for like 20-something years.
Yep.
My son had an interest and it got me back in. And so the first one I did was kind of what I wanted to do for myself. A lot of work, not great. And then I realized I couldn't keep that up. So I decided this year I'm going to do 1 module a month.
Ooh.
And
Wow.
it's a short, I kind of call them drop seeds. You
Right.
drop it in, it's scalable, and it's 5e, and it's more kind of old school story, like the 5e format. So
Right on.
my goal was like 15 pages, make my own maps to the cartographer, and some stock art. And so I've
Awesome.
done two.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. That's more power than I've got. I wish I had time to create like that, because my job involves so many things that aren't game related.
Yeah.
But I recognize how much work that is. But by focusing like that and having a goal, it's a big deal. I mean, it
Well,
really is.
and your points are good. I mean, I learned cartographer for my own games years, but I wound up getting Creative Cloud. I started in, whatever the free one was, learned InDesign, started learning Photoshop. Not great, but enough to get by.
Mhm.
Just to make sure I can
Clean the
get
edges
formats
on.
and everything down.
Yep. Clean the edges on like scanned art. I mean, everything. Yeah.
Figured after a year of doing it, I'll cut my teeth, and if I want to invest to do it better,
Right, yep.
great.
No, absolutely. And YouTube, I used to have a lynda.com account to learn how to do all those. YouTube does just as well as long as you understand accents, because people all over the world know such
Yeah.
great stuff.
There's actually
So,
a really cool trick where most of the Wisconsin libraries around
you
here,
have Lynda accounts?
they give you a limited account for free.
Well,
Oh, nice.
blow me down. Who else does anything here that, yep.
I've been working on a campaign setting for about 6 years, and probably about like 3 months ago, I was looking and noticing that I have probably like 200,000 to 300,000
Words of material.
documents,
Mhm.
And I sit there and think to myself, I should make money.
At least give it the home on the page that you feel it deserves. Yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah.
We're doing a setting right now that is extraordinarily long. It's 20 years worth of material that we're finally putting together. It's on Kickstarter right now. So I feel your pain, man. I do. We spent a weekend in Chicago going through the setting versus the map and trying to combine it with all of our existing library. And so I know where you're at, and if you have any questions when we're done with the Kickstarter, I will happy to tell you all I know and hate about settings.
And I'd suggest looking at Avramir too, if you've seen his stuff. That's a great one you can get on drive-through. That guy, and that's a guy who's a solo publisher, like probably could never work for WotC, has done a bunch of his own art, but it's freaking awesome. Like, it's like you look at it and you're like, this, again, it is. It's like, this was clearly his home campaign that grew, but it's a great book.
And like to that kind of point, it's doable by one guy working really hard. Kevin Crawford, I don't know if you guys know who that is. I've never met him. He's one of my heroes. He has no idea that I think his stuff is so great, that he produces things in a great way. He's been very successful making really useful stuff by himself. The other one I would say is, I know him and I work with him, and I don't know he would hate if you heard this, but Jim Pinto is somebody that I met that he is curmudgeon beyond all belief, and his advice is extraordinarily valuable because it's so honest and biting, right? And he'll like, this sucks. Is this yours? Yes, it sucks. And I'm like, well, you suck too. And then, but people that I don't interact with them very often, that we have hired him. But just by reading his posts and general opinion, because he's been around doing this stuff probably 18 years, right? And it shows, man. But you know what? That saltiness doesn't come because he's just like, woke up the wrong side of the bed. He has seen more people go out of business, and his time doing this way, he's still doing and making games that he likes. He makes very interesting games that are not really wide market. He makes them great. He also does layout like a champion. He does it in about 6 hours. And so, but you see people, even if you never interact with them, but you see their wall go by, like their posts and read them, because you'll see amazing stuff. So Kevin Crawford, Jim Pinto, there's nobody, probably two different people in the world. But I learned a lot. So I encourage that.
Jim's $1 RPG.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
We're still waiting for a bit,
No, I'm still waiting for you to tell me, like, thank you for sending me that $1. I taught you a lesson about RPG making.
But it's been worth it for his grumpy post.
No, it'd been great. No, he's the reason that I had Bleed on Whisper and Venom, because right before I was ready to do it, I got Solomon Guild, and it had the really cool art in the edges. I didn't know you could do that. I'm gonna learn how to do that. Boy, was I sorry. Bleed's complicated. Look, if you don't know anything about pages, Bleed becomes complicated. Master pages on InDesign, but I learned all that because I wasn't gonna let Jim Pinto be better than me.
We have a good master page story too. That so when it's something that we're working on, and I hadn't had time to lay out, I just kept producing content while he was laying stuff out.
Ooh, I bet that.
And I went in and started like jumping into the layout, and I added a new page, and I said, "Where's the master page? There's no master page to this."
You little there on the.
And he goes, "What do you mean?" And then, so that's one of those communication things where we like stopped.
And those are those learning moments that you have to get through before you get better, right? Like, those are the types of things that I'm talking about. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna make a lot of them. Learn from them. Get better.
But it sure felt good when he figured out his master pages. It's like, this is the fantastic. I'm just like,
yeah, right?
boom, boom, like dropping pages in there like it's
That's nothing. I mean, that happens the best when Charles Wright started. He didn't know about master pages when he did Slumber Glazar, and Matt had him change all the headers, and he changed it by hand. So.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh. That's horrible.
So, anybody else with anything before we close up? Yeah, go ahead.
So about 2 years ago, I had done kind of a Dyson map.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'm gonna draw a map.
The Dyson. That's funny. I think it's hysterical that his style. I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
everybody does.
Everyone should if they don't know.
Right.
And like, I'm going to do one of everything that he has in his key.
Mm-hmm.
Stick it all into this little map, and I did that. And then Doug Kovacs,
Mm-hmm.
who writes and does all the maps for Dungeon Crawl Classics, was like, "Oh, this is great. I'll write an adventure for it." And that showed up in Gong Farmer's Almanac.
Right.
So I ended up doing like 5 maps 2 years ago.
That's awesome.
And then
That's
last
awesome.
year I did 3 maps and then layout and like 80, 100 pages of editing.
Yeah.
And then my friend and co-worker just surpassed me and released this, but then I did
Zines are awesome.
this is going around now, so he just released it here.
Awesome.
And the zines are right. So like Gong Farmers is great to get something
It's the
into.
best title
There's a
ever,
bunch
too.
of little publications that you can get stuff into.
Yeah.
I think Tom Wilson is still doing Throwy Games is still doing a little back to basics. So BX magazine that like he wants content. He can't produce all of it, but if you're like, I have a bunch of junk in this because he's like, I just wish I had more magic items in another monster. I was like, all right, well, here you go. But he's looking for someone. Like, it didn't get me anything other than a couple cool magic items and a monster and something. But
that stuff is a reward when you deal with other people. And if somebody finds something I made interesting, I'm good all week. If I get paid $100, I'm like, I'm good for 30 minutes. I'm like, oh, cool. What have you done for me lately? I thought someone up there. I was going to say.
I started prototyping a card and dice dungeon crawl game.
Nice.
I've got a module, and I'm working on a campaign setting.
it's awesome.
That's hardcore because you want to get it all.
So card and dice game. You should talk to a guy named Corey Scanlon. He did Raving Spire, which premiered, which is freaking awesome. Was sold on Amazon.
Yeah, he's not here.
We'll
but
introduce you if we. He's not in this room. But we'll introduce you around, and he's like anybody else here. He's like, you ask him what the travails were, and he'll more than willing to talk to you about producing board games. And they've done his company, which is just him and 2 buddies, have produced a couple board games now, and that original board game like knocked it out of the park. Like they did.
Yep.
I think when they kickstarted, he was like, oh no, like
that.
Yeah,
and that's
at that point.
But they did it in a modest way with a plan that they knew their pricing, like that, and he can talk to you about that stuff more than I would know.
Planning for huge success is big.
What was the name of that box company?
Marion Paper Box. They're awesome. It's still not cheap. If you actually do it, you please find me on Facebook and ask me, because I have a little bit of advice I can give on that you'll need at the time you do it. But it's really cool. And if you really want boxes, because Frog Guy hired me like towards the end of my last one, my wife and I are just putting boxes up in the top of my rafters that were still in the big boxes. But I'm going to sell them. You watch. No, but seriously, that's who I talk to. No, no problem. I don't have the insides though. No.
I'm accepting
Don't talk to her.
bids.
I got a pallet jack.
Anybody else before we go? Anybody else want to close up? You have anything last you want to say, Ian, before we go? Okay. Listen.
Feel free to seek us out.
Yeah.
Thanks for the insight.
Listen?
Yeah, I'm good.
Rocky?
Yeah, just like I said, build your network. Find us all on Facebook. We'll all friend every one of you. Just make sure that we know that you're like D&D people or gaming people.
It's usually easy to
not
tell.
I've been watching you. I hope. Accept it.
No, honestly, most of the people is born in Beleriand, so it's that's not hard. But honestly, yes, network, yes, do all these things. Some advice is good for some people and some bad for others. My best advice is do it. Go make something.
Yeah.
Be proud of it.
Yeah.
And cook Cave Troll, right?
Keep putting in the work. Put in the work.
Smoke, yeah.